There's a way that children really respond to respect. And when you respect them for their capacity to manage themselves and to come up with good ideas about what they should be doing, then they will reciprocate by respecting you when you say, now you really need to stop that and come and do this.
Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education. Lisa, welcome to the Preschool podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Lisa, you're one of the co-directors of Blue Skies for Children in Oakland, California, and your center actually has a really interesting history about how it started out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that background of Blue Skies for Children?
I would be happy to. The people who founded Blue Skies had been working for some years in a child care center that was inside of a home for young, impoverished teen mothers. I mean, really young, like 14 and 15-year-old teen mothers, who had been sort of thrown out by their families and were raising these babies while living in kind of a dorm setting. They, had a small room that had a bed for the mother and a crib for the baby. They ate in a dining hall. Mostly the mothers would bring the babies to the child care center in the morning and hand them over, and then at the end of the day they would pick them up and go to dinner in the dining hall and put them to bed in their rooms. And one of the things that the teachers in this program started to notice was that those babies didn't really know how to play as they started to become toddlers. They were very disorganized toddlers, and it didn't, if you've ever lived with a toddler, you know that when you pick up a broom, they want a broom, and when you put something on the shelf, they want to put something on the shelf. And these kids weren't doing that. And it made them to start thinking really deeply about what is it that a baby learns at home. Because these kids sort of didn't have a home. They weren't following a parent around the house raking leaves or putting dishes away from the dishwasher. They were living this kind of restricted life outside of school. And they realized that while they had all learned to be teachers, this was back in the 70s, the 1970s, different century, they had been trained to work in part-day nursery schools. They were all trained for this kind of enrichment teaching where a child would come, mostly be living at home, but coming to school for a couple hours a day to learn how to play with other kids and do finger painting and things like that. And they realized that when these children were in this full-day child care center, they had to really bring home into it, that they couldn't just be teachers there. They had to also be nurturers, and they had to put home-like activities into the center. So that was a big eye-opener for them about what children need in full-day care. And this was just kind of at the time that the women's movement was starting to send a lot of women out of the home and into the workplace. And these people who were ready to now start a new center of their own were mostly grandmas who had raised their children at home, although they were educated educators. And, they'd kind of gone to work. They'd either done these part-day nursery schools while their kids were little, or they had not worked until their kids were older. And they started to say, oh my gosh, my grandchildren are going to be raised in childcare. What is going to happen to them? And so they decided what they needed to do was to open a full-day, year-round center that served working families. And that, unlike, so at the time there was this sort of bifurcation going on in the field where people who needed full-day care went to daycare, which was run by someone without a lot of education in most cases, who was willing to be there from 7:30 to 6 and keep the kids safe all day. Mm-hmm. And then there continued to be those nice little part-day nursery schools. And what these grandmas said is that, by God, we're going to have a full-day program that is high quality. And they knew that actually high quality didn't mean taking 2-hour nursery school and multiplying it by 5. it meant taking 2-hour nursery school and incorporating it into a full day of nurturing and care. So it has a very strong philosophical root. And while we're now at Blue Skies for Children, we are serving a more affluent population by and large. They're mostly working families, but still the children are living most of their waking hours in group care.
Totally. And would you say that you've also applied some of the learnings from your early days of Blue Skies, where you did have a bit of a unique beginning with the young teenage mothers being part of your program? Has that sort of transcended into some of your philosophies and approaches today?
Yeah, I should clarify, that was not at Blue Skies. The Teen Parent Program was run by another organization. So this was, Blue Skies came from those people who had been working there, but it was not the same organization.
Got it.
Certainly. There still is, when you have young children and you pick them up at 6 o'clock at night, you've got your 6-month-old in the car with you, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have nothing in the house, I'm out of diapers, I have to stop at the store. By the time you stop at the store and you get the necessities and you get home, you're doing good to feed that baby and put her to bed, much less, to really spend a lot of quality time. And the weekends are busy because you've got to get to the dry cleaner. As the children get older, you've got soccer games and birthday parties, and it's a whirlwind. And one of the interesting things that we've realized about this school-home hybrid is that one of the pieces of home that children have lost in many cases is the ability to hang out and just sort of not have to be scheduled and really think about, what do I want to do now? Of course, a birthday party is a lot of fun, but it's a different kind of fun than sitting on the floor in your room and fooling around with Legos, or, going in the backyard and swinging on the tire swing and looking up at the sky. It's a very scheduled life that young children can have these days. So we really stop and think about, what is it that's important for young children. We start enrolling children at 2 months old, and they generally stay until they go to kindergarten. So we've got this wonderful 5 years that is truly formative, and we can make a utopia for those children for those 5 years. And so we want to make sure that they have safe and secure relationships. We know that young children have to have strong relationships, or else they aren't going to thrive. We know they need interesting environments. They need grown-ups who understand them and can be compassionate about the fact that they're just little and they don't know how to do things yet. They haven't figured life out yet. We talk a lot reminding people about the immaturity of a young child's brain, that now in the age of neuroscience, people know that the upper brain doesn't actually complete its maturation until age 25.
Wow.
And when you think about a 3-year-old on that timeline, you realize, oh my God, this is a really immature brain. So, the upper brain is where you have language, you have abstract thought, you have impulse control, and executive function, meaning the ability to do multiple things at the same time. And so even a very sophisticated sounding 3 or 4-year-old really cannot reliably reach that upper brain. And a lot of what nursery school is about is teaching them some strategies for getting there. That's why you take a deep breath when you're upset, because as a grown-up, you're saying, okay, don't go with the primitive brain, climb into the upper brain before you respond, right?
Totally.
And that's one of the most important things children learn in those first 5 years, is how to live with an immature brain and still get along with people and still not get in trouble all the time. and one of the interesting things about that is that the way you best learn that is through play.
Right.
When we talk about play, we have a very clear definition of play. It has to be freely chosen, self-structured, and self-directed. So if you say, here, kid, do this puzzle, that is not play. That's being instructed to do something. If you say, here's some puzzles on the shelf, here's a dollhouse, here's a tire swing, you choose what you'd like to do, then the child is in charge of it, and that's where she is going to learn the very best. A child who is thinking about what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, who he wants to do it with, and reframing his activity as he goes along. One of the interesting things about play is that you can't fail when you play, because if you set yourself a task that's too hard, you'll reset it.
Yep.
You'll just say, oh, well, I don't really have to do it that way. I could do it this way. So we want to make sure that children have a lot of the day unstructured and available to them for play. And then the other piece of play that gets misunderstood is that it requires this compassionate adult guidance. And that means that play isn't just saying, go to it, here's a room full of stuff, do whatever you want. It means the adult is going to be helping children learn the rules of the road, just like when you're driving. You learn all the little details. You turn your turn signal on at this point, you turn the steering wheel this way, you hit the brakes at this point in order to stop in time. And in the classroom, in a good early childhood classroom, the children know rules about how you do puzzles. You carry them to the table and you put them away when you're finished. You push your chair into the table when you're finished, and that tells people that seat is now available. You're not coming back to it with another puzzle. When you're painting at the easel, there are little rules around kind of putting on an apron and choosing paint and putting it away, not using the yellow brush and the blue paint. And then within those guidelines, the children, we have classrooms of 18 children with 2 teachers, and every child can be doing exactly what they want to be doing. And the teachers are not racing all over the room saying, oh, do this, do that, because the children can self-direct. They know this is what I need to do when I'm doing this activity. I can play with the blocks all I want. No one's going to interrupt me. But when I'm done, I do need to put them away so that the next child can use them.
So it sounds like one of the core philosophies in your programs and one of the themes that you're speaking to is finding a good balance of unstructured and maybe some structured events or even guidelines around some of the unstructured things that are happening. Is that a fair statement, do you think?
It is true, because there are certainly times of the day that the teachers are in charge and are telling the children, now we're doing this. When it's nap time, it is nap time. Yeah. You don't get to go choose a puzzle. And so, but most of the framework in our days does have to do with where you are or the nurturing pieces. It's like if your playtime is kind of 9 to 11, you've had your breakfast, you're in your classroom, you've got a long block of time where you know that pretty much you're not going to be interrupted for the teacher's agenda. But then as it's getting to be 11, you'll probably be quietly asked to start cleaning up and getting ready for a story and getting ready for lunch and, kind of toning down the activity level as children are working towards a midday nap. But there's a way that children really respond to respect. And when you respect them for their capacity to manage themselves and to come up with good ideas about what they should be doing, then they will reciprocate by respecting you when you say, now you really need to stop that and come and do this. So we try very hard to minimize the amount of time that the teachers need to be in charge. But when the teachers, need to tell children what to do. But we also know that children do have to learn that.
Yep.
That they do have to respond, and that happens in the relationship with the teacher, because, when you love your teacher, you really want to do what she wants you to do.
Totally, makes sense. Yeah, and I think that goes back to that whole point of the balance, right? And those, the structured piece and the unstructured piece both being playing a significant role in the child's learning and development through those ages. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
We wrote a book, now it's been 10 years ago, called Second Home, which is really all about this kind of growing up in childcare and how the teaching has to really respond to this situation in a different way so that the children are getting the nurturing and the relationships that they, in a 2-hour preschool program, you don't have to have such a tight relationship with the teachers because you sort of have to, hold yourself in for a couple hours, and then you can go home and yell at your mom if you're upset about something. Mm-hmm. But when you're going to be there all day, it's really not healthy to not have a strong relationship where you can be your authentic self for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So we want to be sure, and of course, especially in the baby rooms when we've got these brand new babies, curriculum for the babies, I'm quoting Alison Gopnik, is relationships with human beings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is the heart of what a baby needs, is a relationship with a human being. So we want to be sure that they have that, but continuing on through all the way until they're off to kindergarten, children need to have those trusting relationships where they know that, I can really screw up and this person is still going to be here for me.
Yeah. Great. Switching gears a little bit, because both yourself and your co-director Claire have been part of Blue Skies for a number of years, or any of the the pieces that came on before that. So now, naturally, at some point, you're going to move on, but you probably also want Blue Skies to continue. So there's this question of succession, which I'm sure there's other owners, directors, administrators out there facing the same question of succession. Is this something that you've put any time thinking about, and how, if you have, how is that going?
We've really been working on succession for about 10 years, knowing that eventually we were going to be retiring, and now actually the time is coming within the next few years. There's going to be turnover here. And what we've been doing for the last 10 years is laying a lot of groundwork in the programs to just document. We are the only NAEYC accredited child care center in Oakland, and that accreditation process requires a lot of documentation, which has been very helpful.
Right. But
still more, it turns out there's always, a new little corner that I turn and say, oh gosh, that's not written down anywhere. I have to be sure to write that down. The things that, Claire and I just sort of have had in our heads for a long time, we have to take out of our heads and put them down somewhere else so that new people don't have to keep reinventing the stuff that we already know how to do.
Yeah, so starting early to think about those things and document those things sounds important. And what about on the people side of things?
Yeah, well, the people side is where we have a lot less control, so it's a lot scarier. It's always hard to have to deal with stuff that you don't have a lot of control over. And the fact that our society so undervalues early childhood means that there is a very small pool of qualified people out there to take our places. And that is really, really scary. That, there is massive public funding in every level of education from kindergarten through graduate school. And these first 5 years that are arguably way more important than any of those years have nothing to speak of. They have, a little drop in the bucket. There are a few publicly funded programs, and the truth is there aren't enough educated people to run them very well. So a lot of the publicly funded programs struggle. Early childhood was really the first multidisciplinary subject. That's a very hot topic now in higher education for the last 10 or 15 years, all the, biology and chemistry, you've got biochemistry and all this stuff. But early childhood in the 1920s became this multidisciplinary field when people realized that to work effectively with young children, you need to have education, you need to have psychology, you need to have sociology, you need to have anthropology, you need to know physiology, you have to be a social worker. There are all these fields that come together to create a quality early childhood education. And there are very few people who can do that anymore. I was just at a conference focused on early childhood, and I think 2 out of maybe 20 presenters actually had degrees in early childhood.
Right.
They were mostly, psychologists and social workers, and in some cases, computer gurus.
Yep. And that's such a fascinating disconnect in my mind that I found through doing a lot of these podcasts, as well as learning just how complicated early childhood education is and how experienced and educated you need to be as an early childhood educator, even in comparison, for example, to K-12, where, in a lot of the grade school programs, the teachers literally are just teaching. There's a curriculum and you're teaching it to the children, and a lot of these other components are much more static and less dynamic. And so there's this weird thing where it's so hard and difficult, but yet there's so little investment in it, and so few early childhood professionals that have that level of experience despite the challenges there. So it's a fascinating but a very challenging issue.
It is, and it's this irony is that it's because of the women's movement that we're in this position, because the women's movement sent all these women to work who now needed vastly expanded the need for educated early childhood people. But those women who are now doctors and lawyers and psychologists used to be nursery school teachers because they didn't have very many choices. And it's kind of ridiculous, and yet it's actually the truth that the educated young women who are ambitious and interested in working with children now are going into much higher paying fields.
Well, the exciting thing is if we can turn things around and get more investment in this super important field, we can make those changes happen. We got a long way to go, but there's a lot of exciting things we can do. And you guys certainly are doing a lot of very exciting things at Blue Skies. Lisa, thanks for coming on the show. It's been great having you. If I'm listening to the podcast and I want to go learn more about you, your work, or Blue Skies, where would I go to get more information?
We have a website that's www.blueskies4children.org.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, Lisa. It's been great having you, learning more about your philosophies of having unstructured play and the super important part of the compassionate guidance from ECEs and those relationships, all the amazing things you're doing there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and leave a review. The Preschool Podcast is brought to you by Hi Mama. If you're anything like the thousands of teachers listening to the Preschool Podcast, you know how long it takes to fill out daily sheets, child portfolios, and lesson plans. And that's where Hi Mama saves the day. With an easy-to-use interface built by teachers for teachers, Hi Mama can cut the time you spend on documentation and parent engagement in half. Create and send beautiful daily sheets, photos, videos, and messages to parents in seconds, saving you time in your busy day. Podcast listeners can get a free tour with one of our community advisors. Go to himama.com